Obviously, Courtney does a great job. She's our Executive Director of Finance, and I've asked her to come up this evening to go over the ESSER report. I think just to give us a good perspective of where we're at right now in the process. We're getting about halfway through this process, and just to give you guys an update of where we're at. So
Thanks.
What do I do here?
He does a lot, actually.
I don't know what I do, but I definitely stay busy doing it. I know that. So very funny.
It's hard work being so funny all the time. Thank you, Johnny. Well, good evening. I'm glad to see you all again. So like Johnny said, I'm here to give you a different kind of financial update specific to funding under ESSER. Just to kind of refresh your memory a little bit, we haven't talked about ESSER very much here lately, but it was definitely a big word back in 2020, 2021. So ESSER is Elementary and Secondary School Emergency Relief, and it's federal funds, and this was awarded to our school districts, and it was specifically to address the impact of COVID-19 that it was having and was going to continue to have subsequent years on our elementary and secondary schools. And the initiatives were specific to that the funds were supposed to be used to safely reopen, sustain the safe operation of schools, and then address the impact of COVID-19 on our students. And that was really specific to learning loss and any mental health that's had the fallout from the pandemic. So again, just kind of further refresh your memory, we had 3 different pieces of legislation that actually came through under ESSER. The 2 were actually under one legislation and then another. So ESSER 1 and 2 came out pretty quickly, March 2020 and December 2020. The last, which is the largest, ESSER III under ARP, came out in March of 2021. And as you see, as we go up 1, 2, and 3, we get substantially bigger. And you can see how much we were allotted for Plano ISD. ESSER 1 actually was just a little over this 4.033. It was actually 4.155, I believe, million. And if you can remember back in 2019, 2020, the state fully supplanted our funding. And so what that meant for us was that we had an increase of a recapture to pay back to the state in that $4.1 million. ESSER II wasn't fully supplanted by the state, but it was reduced also for hold harmless, specific to the 2020-2021. So again, a piece of that was supplanted by the state, and again, what that meant for us again was an increase in recapture. ESSER III is the only piece of legislation that the state did not supplant any funding, and it was fully supplemental. That $43 million was fully supplemental to Plano ISD. And then, of course, you can see the spending timelines. We've reached the end of ESSER 1. ESSER 2 will finish out in 2023, and then we'll have one more year under ESSER 3 for 23-24. ESSER 3 was a little bit different. Again, it was issued under different administration, and so they had additional requirements. If you can remember, we had to engage our stakeholders and provide an opportunity for public input, and then we had to develop a plan. The district had to develop a plan. And also under that was a minimum 20% set aside specific to learning loss. And so for us, that's about $8 million of our ESSER 3 allocation. And then we have to address the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on our unique student populations. And then within 30 days of receiving our ESSER 3 grant, we were to actually post on our website what they call a RIPIX, which is the Return to In-Person Instruction and Continuity of Service Plan. And then we had to post a ESSER 3 funds plan. And all of those are still available on our website. So back in, I think we brought this to you, I think in June of 2021. So at that time, again, just refresh your memory, we did have a stakeholder survey, which was our staff, our families, and our community. Of course, we have a dedicated website specific to ESSER. And then based on the learning community's input and survey results, ESSER funds were determined to be used to address these 5 areas: mitigating learning loss, wraparound services, workforce continuity, professional learning, CCMR, and then we did have kind of another ESSER expenditure initiative. So this is where we are as of October 25th, 2022, where we are specific to our expenditures. As you can see, we have fully spent our ESSER 1 funding. We have no funds left there to spend. Our ESSER 2, we have a pretty significant total, and we can kind of walk through some of the initiatives, but we still have $9.2 million to spend of our ESSER 2 funds, which we'll finish spending out this year in 22-23. And then, of course, our ARP ESSER 3, we've spent through October 25th, $21.4 million, and still will have $21.8 million to spend. As you can see, we have a little bit in every area. Most of those, again, those areas for those strategic initiatives came under ESSER III, but we did have opportunities in ESSER II to put funds towards our workforce continuity and professional learning, specific to our retention bonus or stipend this year, and then some other ESSER fundings under those ESSER II to supplant some funding. So again, just to kind of recap, so as of October 25th, we have spent nearly $35.6 million of our ESSER 1, 2, and 3. Remaining of our ESSER 2 to be spent in 22-23 is $9.2 million, and a remaining of ESSER 3 to be spent in 22-23 and 23-24 is $21.8 million. And just kind of a side note, of our ESSER 3 that we spent through October 25th, we actually spent 32.4% of those funds towards student learning loss. So we are spending more than the required 20% under ESSER 3. Can I answer any questions?
I had one question. In terms of some of the budget line items that ESSER 2 and 3 are able to help us out with going through to September 30th, 2024, what items that are currently being covered by that are going to have to start being covered by the M&O budget come September 2024?
We do have some staffing positions that we're going to have start having discussions on. Some of those were supplanted, so I would think that the idea that those would roll back off into our general funds. And then there was some supplemental positions that the district leadership will have to see, again, where are we at, what are the needs of the district, and assess those at that time.
Okay.
So this is maybe a dumb question, but specifically with ESSER 3 funds, those can be reallocated from one budget line item to another, correct?
Yes, sir. Correct.
Do we know, and this is a little bit of a broad question, but do we know in terms of percent ESSER used where we are in comparison to like our peer districts or how other districts are using these funds, right? I remember when these decisions were made last year, there was sort of an intentional decision to make sure that we weren't just spending it all up front on something knee-jerky, right? But actually waiting for the data, seeing the learning loss, and making that intentional decision. So do we have any idea how we're doing compared to peer districts?
Actually, I think we're doing really well. I know there's a lot of feedback right now that's potentially coming out of the legislature that is really questioning why districts haven't spent down their funds, mainly because, as you had just said, that they're trying to span it out over these three years, but they're really trying to eye those. But there's a big lag of actually when we spend these funds and when we draw down. So they're actually able to look in a TEA, basically module or portal that shows how much we draw down on our expenditures. And so it's not very fair because what they see in this module for expenditure drawdown may not be actually what the district has spent. So, but as of right now, the way that we are, just based on some of my discussion with our peers, is we're doing a very, very good job as far as pulling, not only spending our funds, but going in and drawing down. We draw down at least quarterly. We've tried to do it about every other month, but we have quite a few federal funds, so it does make sense. These funds were actually drawn down from the district at the end of September, and then we'll draw down again at the end of December, just to stay on top of that, so that no one is eyeing our ESSER funds and saying that we didn't spend our funds.
I think it's important to note, I mean, obviously, we're getting close to being halfway through the ESSER programs, and we've spent $35 million. We have $31 million to go, so we're a little over halfway. So we're right in line. Everything's been budgeted, been appropriated. Our goal is whenever this is all said and done, we at the end of the 24, we'll come in right at zero at that point. So.
Great, thank you guys.
So I have a question about the student learning loss, and I know that we also are complying with House Bill 4545. Are we using ESSER funds to comply with House Bill 4545?
We have allocated funds specific to our campuses, and I obviously may have to look to Lisa just to address anything outside of that, but we did allocate funds specifically to our campus to help them with their House Bill 4545 needs.
Okay, so in a way, I don't know what you would call that, but, the federal is... our federal dollars are being designated or required by state mandate. Is that fair to say? Okay.
Yes.
So I think what I'd suggest is that on our talking points, when we meet with our representatives, we need to make sure that they all understand these funds, they can't look at these funds relative to funding public education. Once again, never underestimate the legislature's ability to punish those of us who are doing the right thing. And we are doing the right thing by using our money wisely for the intended purpose. But we really need to drive home with these people, with our representatives, that they need to go and fight for this. They cannot double dip on us on this stuff.
And I just wanted to follow up, maybe something that can be provided in a board update in the future, just in terms of if we were not to eliminate any of the positions currently being covered by the ESSER funds, what the M&O budget impact would be. And that way we could.
We know that.
Great. Let's go there.
So if you want me to go there, we can. But so obviously we have internal discussions on this because it does have an impact on our budget. But there's approximately $9 million of ESSER funds, ESSER II funds that will roll off our operating budget for this next year. And then there's a subsequent $8 million of ESSER III monies that will roll off of our M&O budget for 24-25. So $17 million over the next 2 years.
Okay.
$9 million and then $8 million.
So if we were to continue to operate the same way, absent those, it would result in an additional potentially $8.5 million budget deficit on top of whatever budget deficit we have, or am I misreading that?
So no. It would be an additional $17 million over a 2-year period.
Over
You'd have
2 years.
$9 million and then $8 million.
Okay, each 2 years.
That's right. It's subsequent. So it's cumulative, I mean.
Cumulative.
So you've got 9 in 23-24, and you've got 8 in 24-25.
Well, so I'm saying, what would the budget impact be in 25-26?
It'll be the $17 million
Yeah.
if we keep everything completely going.
Okay, so we're going to obviously have to do some budget maneuvering to make up for that.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, so in theory, it should get us through 2024. But there's no magic wand to say that, okay, we're totally recovered from the pandemic. And so I think there needs to be a conversation maybe with federal representatives to see if there are any conversations taking place at the federal level for expanding what still is an impact of COVID-19. I know that we just...
That's an uphill battle because I think most federal discussions are, okay, we're done with this.
Really?
Let's turn the corner and, this is a done deal. So I haven't heard, I don't know, Dr. Williams, have you heard anything? I have not heard anything about trying to continue the ESSER fundings in any form or fashion.
I have not heard anything beyond that.
Yeah.
I personally, just in terms of an opinion on that, would prefer to keep the federal government as far away from local Plano ISD, local control as possible.
Yeah, but when I'm looking at a $17 million expenditure to keep the programs rolling that we currently have in place to support these students who are still overcoming the,
Right.
unfinished learning. I don't know when we get to a stopping point, but it probably isn't just.
Obviously, there'll have to be, there's evaluation procedures that'll have to go into that as those funds roll off. But the ESSER was never intended to be a permanent. It was finite dollars to be spent in a 3-year period.
Yeah.
So.
Well, ESSER IV, no.
I think it's a Texas problem and it's a recapture problem. I mean, it's a money problem, right? It's a money problem, and I think there's more than one way to skin a cat.
Oh, I like cats.
I know, I'm a dog person.